What's up there, nerds and nerdettes? It's your close personal friend, Joseph Craven, here for the numbers game. I'm running out the clock, joined as always by my co-host, little puppy Radar O'Reilly, who is currently running around the living room looking for anywhere she can possibly fake bury a chew that I just gave her. That's right, she doesn't like chewing on things. She'd much rather bury it, forget about it, and then find it a week later when it's kind of stinking up the couch and get really excited that she can chew on it then. Very, very good resource management from this dog here. Anyway, this is, of course, the numbers game where we get into the raw numbers of the past week. Nothing necessarily really amazing or opinion-based here. We're just looking at the actual stats, the score lines, so on and so forth that make up week 5 of the SEC season. As well, we will look at ranking changes, SEC players of the week, and then the statistical leaders as well in all of this throughout this to this point in the season, 2018 season. Now, this episode's coming out on a Monday evening, and there's a reason behind that. The reason is we're planning on putting out some extra, side episodes, some overtime episodes, or maybe introducing some new segments later in the week. So there should be plenty of running out the clock content coming up, but I want to make sure that this goes out as soon as possible, just so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle a little bit there. Let's look at the scores on the week. Number 1, Alabama handled Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns of Lafayette, 56-14. In that one, of course, preseason Heisman Trophy winner Tua Tagovailoa went 8 of 8 for 128 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Jalen Hurts came in 4 of 6, 118 and a touchdown. And we even got to see the third Alabama quarterback, Mac Jones, the freshman from Jacksonville, Florida, who came in and had 94 passing yards and 1 touchdown. On the ground, Najee Harris rushed the ball 11 times for 73 yards and a touchdown. Damian Harris only rushed the ball 5 times for 20 yards. Tua had 2 carries for 12 yards, no touchdowns either. Oddly enough, we saw some other running backs really see significant playing time here. Brian Robinson Jr., Josh Jacobs, and Jerome Ford carried the ball for decent, not significant, but decent enough yardage. Robinson Jr., 12 attempts for 65 yards. Jacobs had 6 attempts for 49 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. And Ford carried the ball 3 times, but got 33 yards, 11 yards per carry there. As noted, the Crimson Tide did have a few 100 passing yards and a few touchdowns. Most notably, though, 2 receivers got over 100 yards on the day. A lot of those yards through the air went to these 2 guys in particular. You had Jalen Waddle and Henry Ruggs III catching most of the yardage. Waddle, 3 catches for 138 yards, 2 touchdowns. Ruggs, 5 catches, 116, and 2 touchdowns as well. Jerry Jeudy added 58 receiving yards, but no scores. So the Crimson Tide showing that offense once again. Texas A&M and Arkansas. A&M scored 24 points, Arkansas 17, keeping it a lot closer than a lot of people would have assumed. Let's look at the losing side first of all. It was Ty Storey who saw most of the snaps under center for the Razorbacks. He threw the ball 26 times, completing 14 passes, 193 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Rakeem the Dream Boyd carried the ball 10 times for 47 rushing yards. Story also carried the ball 10 times for 1 rushing yard. So there you go there. Cole Kelly did come in. He attempted 1 pass, did not complete it. He carried the ball 1 time for the 1 rushing touchdown for the Razorbacks. Through the air, you had Cheyenne O'Grady and Michael Woods leading the Razorbacks in yardage. O'Grady with 77 yards on 3 receptions. Woods, 50 yards, 2 receptions, 1 touchdown. Rakeem Boyd added 4 receptions for 33 yards coming out of the backfield for the Razorbacks on the day. But going to the other side of things, the winning side, Texas A&M was, of course, led by quarterback Kellen Mond, who went 17 of 26 for 201 yards, no touchdowns and 2 interceptions on the day, so not the cleanest performance out of Mond. Though on the ground, it was Travion Williams, the the speedster there for the Aggies, who led the way once again, getting back in form after last week. 29 rushing attempts for 152 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day. Through the air, there were a couple of notable receivers for the Aggies. You had Cameron Buckley, Jace Sternberger, and Hezekiah Jones. Strong names here. Buckley had 5 receptions for 72 yards, Sternberger 4 for 51, and Jones 4 for 33. No other Aggies had multiple catches in this game. Number 2, Georgia put up 38 points to defeat Tennessee, who got 12 points in a game that kind of looked lackluster, to say the least, for the Bulldogs. Jarrett Guarantano for Tennessee went 13 of 21 for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not the most impressive yardage amount, but a solid performance from Guarantano. On the ground, though, the Volunteers struggled to get moving. Leading rusher Ty Chandler only had 27 yards on 5 attempts. Tim Jordan followed him, 6 attempts for 21 yards. And it was Jeremy Banks rounding things out with 6 attempts as well for only 18 yards. Chandler, however, made up for it through the air. He caught 4 passes for 53 yards and 1 of the 2 touchdowns on the day. The other touchdown went to wide receiver Josh Palmer. Only 1 catch, but it was a 37-yard touchdown for the Volunteers. On the other side of things, Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm went 16 of 22 for 185 yards. No touchdowns, but no interceptions there, averaging 8.4 yards per play. Justin Fields came in, attempted 2 passes, only completed 1 for 5 yards. Again, no touchdowns. Elijah Holyfield led the way for the Bulldogs on the ground with 16 rushing attempts. Those went for 78 yards. Junior Brian Harrion rushed the ball 9 times for 56 yards. And it was DeAndre Swift, a sophomore from Pennsylvania, who rushed the ball 12 times for 50 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Fields, the quarterback, came in and rushed the ball 5 times for 45 yards and 2 touchdowns, showing his mobility there. Through the air, there were a few Bulldogs with multiple catches. In particular, you had Mecole Hardman, 4 catches for 43 yards, and Riley Ridley, 4 catches for 36 yards. Behind them, nothing too notable through the air for the Georgia Bulldogs, but it's a victory and they advance. Number 10, Auburn, went 24-13 against the University of Southern Mississippi in a game that experienced some weather delays and just all in all awkwardness. And you can always expect a weather delay game to just not be the most statistically impressive game there. Hard to read whether Auburn played down to their competition or Southern Miss played up to their competition, or if it just was bad weather and that's about it. For Auburn, Jarrett Stidham went 19 of 33 for 245 yards and 2 touchdowns. And on the ground, Cam Martin rushed the ball 24 times for 90 yards. It was Jatarvius Whitlow who, on the ground, backed up Martin, but only 4 carries for 23 yards. Again, Martin really pulling basically all the weight on the ground there. Anthony Schwartz, a freshman wide receiver, actually had the lone rushing touchdown on the day for Auburn. And notably, Jarrett Stidham was credited with 4 rushing attempts for negative 26 yards, and a pretty decent average of negative 6.5 yards. Through the air, though, of course, the Auburn Tigers succeeded there. Darius Slayton, 5 receptions for 91 yards. Seth Williams added 2 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. And along with that, it was actually the Auburn fullback, Chandler Cox, that had the other receiving touchdown on the day. Auburn survives and advances, and now we move on to the next score on the week, and that's Vanderbilt and Tennessee State. Vanderbilt starting to look a little bit more like what we expect out of Vanderbilt, barely holding off the Tennessee State Tigers 31-27. But hey, a victory's a victory, and let's look and see how Vanderbilt did statistically with star quarterback Kyle Shurmer. Well, Shurmer went 22 of 29, pretty decent completion percentage, 297 yards and 3 touchdowns. The problem here is that 2 of those 7 incompletions were actually interceptions. So Shurmer, 22 of 29, 297, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. On the ground, Keyshawn Vaughn and Kyrie Blasingame led the way for the Commodores. Vaughn had 17 rushes for 146 yards and a touchdown. Blasingame, 10 carries, 88 yards. As expected, though, the Vanderbilt wide receivers were able to put up the more impressive numbers. I say receiving core because you can't just say wide receivers when one of their main targets is, of course, their tight end, Pinckney. But Khalija Lipscomb had 9 receptions for 174 yards and 2 touchdowns. Behind him, C.J. Bowler, 7 catches, 71 yards. And as mentioned, Jared Pinckney, the tight end, 2 catches, 28 yards. But he did have one of the touchdowns through the air for the Commodores. Vanderbilt improves to 3-2 after that non-conference victory. The Florida Gators traveled to Starkville, Mississippi, in a very, very hotly anticipated game that absolutely did not live up to billing. It was just a really, really ugly game. 13-6 was the final score of Florida over number 23 Mississippi State. And on the losing side, I could give you some offensive statistics, but they're really not even there. Nick Fitzgerald went 11 of 26 for 98 passing yards and only a 3.8 yard average. Running back Kylan Hill, 9 attempts for 41 yards and a decent 4.6 yard average. Aries Williams, 3 rushing attempts for 31 yards, averaging 10.3 yards per carry. However, it was Fitzgerald that was credited with 20 rushing attempts for only 32 yards. Receiving, Osiris Mitchell had 3 catches for 35 yards, but most notably, of course, he was responsible for dropping what would have been the Bulldogs' lone touchdown on the day. An open pass delivered perfectly, hit him in the hands, fell to the ground. Dedrick Thomas, 2 catches for 21 yards, and standout so far in the season, Stephen Guidry, 2 catches for only 18 yards. All in all, a forgettable day out of the Bulldogs. And on the other side, not a whole lot better for Florida. Felipe Franks completed 22 of 31 passes for 219 yards, which is a decent number for sure. 1 interception there. A lot of his passes, of course, came off of bubble screens, so you really have to give his wide receivers a lot of credit for their ability to get the ball and then get yardage after that. The lone touchdown of the day came off of a trick play where Kadarius Toney of the Gators got a lateral and then heaved it into the end zone, 20 yards for a touchdown. That went to the tight end, Morrill Stevens. On the ground, LaMichael Pirine carried the ball 10 times for 55 yards. Damian Pierce, 4 times for 30 yards. Jordan Scarlett, 10 times for 21 yards. Tony, 2 times for 20 yards. And Felipe Franks credited with 6 carries, -4 yards, but really he didn't try to rush the ball very much. Several Gators had multiple receptions on the day. Josh Hammond led the way in yardage, 3 receptions for 47 yards. Trevin Grimes, it might be Trevon Grimes, I didn't research that. Trevin Grimes caught the ball 4 times for 34 yards. Van Jefferson 4 times for 29 yards. And running back LaMichael Pirine, 2 catches for 24 yards. Freddie Swain had 2 catches for 21. As you can tell, the Gators went out there spreading the ball, trying to get the ball out to the outside and let the wide receivers make moves, which led to an offensively painful game to watch on both sides, but the Gators will take a big victory and a clean victory. The lone interception on the game was a tip ball that really could have gone either way, just happened to fall into the hands of a Mississippi State player. And a lot of that was because Franks really didn't try to throw the ball downfield much. He threw it out to the outside and let the wide receivers move, which was smart game planning. As mentioned before, though, Morrill Stevens, the tight end, had the 1 touchdown on the day with a 20-yard catch. We'll move on from that. In the SEC East, in a battle to try to prove who is the true number 2 team, the number 17 Kentucky Wildcats defeated South Carolina 24-10. On the losing side, Jake Bentley, the quarterback, went 13 of 28 for 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions. The other Gamecock quarterback, Michael Scarnecchia, came into the game and completed 4 of 6 passes for 45 yards. Rico Dowdle carried the ball 13 times for 44 yards. Bentley, 8 times for 37 yards. A.J. Turner carried the ball 5 times for 33, and Mon Denson 7 times for 32. Trying to spread the ball out on the ground, but not really getting much of anything going there for the Gamecocks. Through the air, star receiver Deebo Samuel struggled again, only 2 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown. I say struggled because it was only 2 catches. Obviously, South Carolina would have liked to have been able to get the ball to him a lot more than that, considering his talent level and the production level that he was having on the game. Shee Smith had the ball 4 times for 40 yards as well through the air. On the other side, of course, Kentucky is a defense-first team, so there's no telling what these offensive stats are going to look like on a game-to-game basis. But Terry Wilson, the quarterback, threw the ball 20 times, completed 13 of them for 132 yards, 1 touchdown on the day. On the ground, no surprise here, the Wildcats tried to pound it with Benny Snell 28 times for 99 yards and a touchdown, 3.5-yard average for the legit Heisman candidate, as it says on their website, their SB Nation website. Terry Wilson carried the ball 9 times for 59 yards and a touchdown. And there was a third rushing touchdown that went to Asim Rose. I don't know how to pronounce his name. He's a sophomore out of Cleveland, Ohio, and he carried the ball 7 times for 38 yards and, of course, got that 1 touchdown. As expected, though, nothing noteworthy as far as the receiving stats for the Kentucky Wildcats. They spread the ball out a decent amount, but their leading receiver had 3 catches for 31 yards, and that, of course, is tight end C.J. Conrad. All in all, Kentucky wins off of defense, and we'll talk about their defense in a little bit because Josh Allen had himself another game. Finally, number 5, LSU defeated Ole Miss 45-16. Jordan Ta'amu completed 19 of 38 passes for 178 yards and 1 interception in the losing effort. Scotty Phillips carried the ball 16 times for a very nice 96 yards and 1 touchdown. However, it was not enough, obviously, to get the offense really going for the Rebels. Ta'amu carried the ball 8 times for 25 yards. Isaiah Woolard 6 times for 22. A.J. Brown caught the ball 9 times for 72 yards. DK Metcalf 3 times for 37. DeMarcus Lodge 3 times for 23 yards. So the star receiving group there held slightly in check by that very nice LSU defense. Surprisingly enough, it was the LSU offense that exploded in this game, or maybe not surprisingly if you look at what the Ole Miss defense tends to do. Quarterback Joe Burrow had a season best 18 of 25 for 292 yards through the air and 3 touchdowns. Along with that, though, he led the LSU Tigers in rushing. Only 9 carries, but 96 yards and a touchdown, averaging 10.7 yards per carry. Nick Brossette, one of the better backs in the SEC, had 20 carries, but only held to 3.6 yards per carry, 72 yards total, 1 touchdown. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the other running back in that dual running back threat type of offense they have, carried the ball 11 times for 67 yards and had the 3rd ground touchdown for the Tigers. Through the air, you had a couple of notable performances. Justin Jefferson had 5 catches for 99 yards and 2 of the touchdowns. Freshman Terrace Marshall Jr. from Bossier City, Louisiana, had 1 catch, but it was for 52 yards. And Stephen Sullivan had 5 catches for 50 yards as well. The other touchdown through the air went to Jamar Chase. It was a 121-yard touchdown, his only catch on the day. As far as the polls go, there's really no change. At the top of things, Alabama is number 1 in both polls. Georgia number 2, which is notable because they were number 3 in the coaches poll last week, so they've moved up a spot. LSU holds steady at 5 and 6 in the AP and coaches polls, respectively. Auburn moves up 2 spots to number 8 in the AP, 1 spot to number 9 in the coaches poll. Kentucky jumps up 4 spots in the AP poll to number 13 in the country. They only jumped up 2 spots to 15 in the coaches poll. Of course, Mississippi State drops out of the rankings in both polls after their 2nd conference loss in a row. Here's some teams receiving votes, though. In the AP, Texas A&M got 31 votes, Mississippi State 3 votes, and Missouri got 8 votes. In the coaches, Florida got 105 votes, Texas A&M 31, Mississippi State 13. Missouri, 21. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, but the Florida Gators climbed up to number 22 in the AP poll, unranked in the coaches poll. Sorry about that, Florida. Did not mean to overlook you. The SEC Players of the Week always are announced, I believe, on Monday. I don't think it's on Sunday. I think it's on Monday. The Offensive Player of the Week was LSU quarterback Joe Burrow. As mentioned, career highs for both rushing with 96 yards, passing with 292, and total offense in leading LSU to that victory. He accounted for 4 touchdowns, 3 through the air, 1 on the ground. The Tigers had 573 yards and 45 points, both season highs. And it was also the 5th straight game that LSU has improved in total yards from their previous game. Perhaps most notably for Joe Burrow, though, is that he is 5-0 as LSU's starter and has thrown no interceptions to this point on the year. As mentioned before, Kentucky linebacker Josh Allen continues his reign of dominance. He had 8 tackles, having career highs for tackles for loss with 4 and quarterback sacks with 3. He also caused a fumble and had a QB hurry in that victory over South Carolina. In their 3 conference games so far, Kentucky has only allowed 11 points per game. On special teams, it was Texas A&M punter Braden Mann who won that Special Teams Player of the Week award. He punted 4 times with a 48.8-yard average, a longest punt of 65 yards, and 2 of those punts ended up in the 20-yard line. It was apparently an underwhelming week for freshmen, as Florida kicker Evan McPherson was named Freshman of the Week, so apparently no one else really did anything. He made 2 field goals against Mississippi State, a 39-yarder and a 21-yarder. He had 4 kickoffs, averaging 62.5 yards per kickoff. But to his credit, he has made 8 of his first 9 field goal attempts so far on the season, so good for him. Offensive lineman of the week was George Afoso-Adjei of Kentucky. He graded at 90% with 2 knockdown blocks and 19 blocks at the point of attack. No missed assignments, did not allow a quarterback sack or pressure, and had a key block to help spring A.J. Rose's 24-yard touchdown run. Kentucky has scored at least 24 points in each of its first 3 SEC games, the first time since 1997. Ja'Kai Polite from Florida was the Defensive Player of the Week. He had his first multi-sack game of the career. He also added 3 tackles and a pass breakup to lead the Gators against the Bulldogs. The statistical leaders to this point on the season are as follows. Jordan Ta'amu of Ole Miss still leads the conference in passing yards with 1,537. He has 10 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Drew Lock of Missouri behind him, 1,283 yards, 11 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. Kyle Shurmer of Vanderbilt has 1,231 yards, just a little bit behind Locke, 9 touchdowns, 4 INTs. Kellen Mond of A&M, 1,221 for 7 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. And Tua Tagovailoa adding 1,161 yards, 14 touchdowns, no interceptions so far. It should be noted that Joe Burrow is in 6th place, the only other SEC quarterback to have over 1,000 yards passing so far. He has 1,023, as noted, 6 touchdowns and no interceptions. Tagovailoa leads the conference in touchdown passes with 14. Surprisingly, Felipe Franks has 12 to be in 2nd place, and Drew Lock with 11, and Jordan Ta'amu with 10 behind him. Those are the only SEC quarterbacks that have double-digit passing touchdowns. As far as rushing the ball goes, UK's Benny Snell Jr. still leads the conference in yardage. He has 639 yards and 8 touchdowns. Both of those are highs for the conference. He also has the high mark in rushing attempts with 115 yards, which brings him to a rushing average of 5.6 yards per carry. Snell carries the ball 23 times a game on average so far, putting him on pace to have, well, simply put, a lot of touches and a lot of yards. And A&M's Travion Williams is in 2nd place with 582 yards. He has 6 touchdowns on the season. Scotty Phillips of Ole Miss still in top 5. 563 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns as well. Nick Brossette dropping down to 4th place in yardage, 481 yards, 6 touchdowns. He is 2nd place in the conference with 103 rushing attempts so far on the season. And Georgia's Elijah Holyfield jumps up into 5th place. This first time I believe that he's been on the list. 368 rushing yards, only 2 touchdowns on the year. Should be noted, Keyshawn Vaughn of Vanderbilt's behind him. 5 touchdowns and only 8 less yards, 360 so far on the year. Through the air, your leading receivers so far, we have a new name at the top of things. Khalija Lipscomb of Vanderbilt now has 480 receiving yards on the season, 6 touchdowns. A.J. Brown of Ole Miss drops to 2nd place, 453 yards, 3 touchdowns. Emmanuel Hall of Missouri, 430 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jerry Jeudy of Alabama, 423 yards, 6 touchdowns. And DK Metcalf of Ole Miss rounds out the top 5 with 405 yards and 4 touchdowns. Defensively speaking, Josh Allen, the man having the monster season, is now the league leader in sacks with 6. He's the only one to reach that mark so far on the year. Not much change, though, right behind him. With 5 sacks apiece are Isaiah Buggs of Alabama, Christian Miller of Alabama, Montez Sweat of Mississippi State. Those are the players that have 5 sacks. And a handful have 4 behind them. I'll just go ahead and list them. Armon Watts of Arkansas, DeAndre Walker of Georgia, Ja'Kai Polite of Florida, Markel Winters of Ole Miss, and Jabari Zuniga of Florida as well. A handful of SEC players have multiple interceptions, but only one so far has 3 interceptions on the year. That's South Carolina defensive back Rashad Fenton with 3. In 2nd place, though, is a large tie across many players that have 2 interceptions. So here is the list. Kentucky's Darius West, Alabama's Deontay Thompson, Georgia's DeAndre Baker, Arkansas's Dre Greenlaw, LSU's Greedy Williams, Auburn's Daniel Thomas, Alabama's Xavier McKinney, and LSU's Grant Delpit, or Delpit. That's the impolite pronunciation, I assume. Hey, that's going to round out the numbers game for today, October 1st. Woo! Week 5 in the books, Week 6 coming along. Join us again next week as we have more ROTC, especially with the numbers game. But jump back in later in the week, and we're going to talk a lot more, have a lot more new content for you, hopefully. Stay posted to Running Out the Clock. As always, thank you for listening. I'm your friend, Joseph Craven. Like, subscribe, share it with anyone that you think would be interested in listening to the world's worst SEC podcast.